Hi there, thank you so much for joining us today. Now, this live was postponed from earlier in the week, so apologies for that, but we are back today with Zana and we're going to be talking about the high-fat diet and understanding why it works, how it works, and what you need to do. So let's get Zana on so that we can get... Hi there. So if you've got any questions, feel free to send them over and we will answer them whilst we're on the live.
Hello.
Hello, how are you?
Very good. How are you doing?
Good, yes, I'm good, thank you. Not too bad. So I've just given an introduction that today it's all about the high-fat diet. We're going to understand why, what, and I've had a few questions come in, so we'll answer those as well. So I wanted to start by saying I got the book. I bought the book a while back, and I'm not going to lie, it's quite a lot to take on, and it's quite a different mindset for someone. So why would you go on the high fat diet in the first place?
Why would you bother with all of this
Why?
upheaval? Exactly. I agree. There's some that would argue, now I'm not necessarily one of these people, just to be clear, but there's some that would argue that this is the type of way we should be eating anyway. That our bodies have evolved burning fat as a fuel. This whole burning of carbohydrates, sugars, effectively, is much more of a recent phenomenon in terms of human evolution, if you like, and that is much more natural and better for us. Now, I'm not sure I would wholly rule that, but I do in part. But to put this in English, if you're sitting there watching this and you're thinking, well, why would I bother? The top reasons really to do it. One is it targets belly fat to an extraordinary degree. So if you have belly fat to lose, or you find it very difficult to lose belly fat, it's one of the best approaches I know of for reducing it.
Right.
It's great for energy, very good for sustainable energy. It helps sleep. It's great for mood. So all of those really helps. And then the final thing, which is really simple, if you want to kill sugar cravings, it's the fastest way I know to get you on track to kind of stop the cravings.
Okay, so that gives you many reasons to do it. But is it something you would always put your clients on? So you obviously do lots of nutritional consultations. Do you straight away think that's the high fat diet, that's what you need to do?
I wouldn't put all clients on it, no. But there are clients that when they start talking, yes, you go, yeah, you're a high fat
Do
candidate.
you have a criteria that you would
I
like?
do. I have a
What
few
is that?
for them. One is, I mean, and I've kind of mentioned them. If somebody comes to me and they've stubborn belly fat and they can't seem to lose it,
Right.
they're a great candidate for this.
Okay.
Equally, if they mention belly fat and things like low energy, even better. I'm like, right, well, now we're going to get a double whammy on it. Those things work super well. That said, I would always want to find out if they're vegetarian or vegan in the background, because it's harder to do. If you're somebody who likes a drink of alcohol and is very unlikely to give it up, then you're unlikely to get the results with this. So I kind of want to know a bit about the background and what's going on too, just to see is it realistic. But certainly stubborn fat that you can't seem to shift, particularly if it's around the middle, and low energy, that now, gosh, that's the time to really go for it.
Okay. Okay. And how does it work? Because it does seem, I've mentioned it to a couple of my friends recently, and they're like, so you just eat a lot of fat? It seems a bit counterintuitive. So
It's
how does it work?
super counterintuitive. That's what makes it so much fun on so there's let's track back a little bit. There's a thing called metabolic flexibility, which really refers to the body's capacity to be flexible in burning sugar as a fuel or burning fat as a fuel.
Okay.
So running around most days, all day, really, every day, for most people, if not everyone you meet, you're likely to be burning sugar as a fuel, not fat. But the argument is, and this is a bit like I was mentioning earlier, that we evolved burning fat as the fuel, and occasionally we get our hands on carbohydrates and sugars. So occasionally we flip from the fat burning into the sugar burning and then back to the fat burning. Whereas now it's very much sugar burning and rarely, if ever, fat burning.
Right.
Now, with the high fat, it's not just high fat. You're not just adding in fats. It's very, very definitely low carbohydrate, low sugars. So you're taking the sugars out, so now there's no sugars to burn, and your body has to flip into burning fat as a fuel.
Right.
So the benefit of that is, well, there's a few benefits, but the two big benefits are, first is energy. We learn that calories are a bad thing when it comes to shape. They're not. There's 9 calories per gram of fat. Calories are units of energy. There's only 4 calories. There's only 4 units of energy per gram of carbohydrate. So in other words, every gram of fat gives you more than double the energy than a gram of carbohydrate would. So when your body's burning fat as its fuel, then you're getting double the energy. But it's burning the fat as the fuel. And then the other benefit, and this is why it really works from the shape point of view, your body's burning fat as a fuel, which means it can burn your own body fat too.
Right.
Go down.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And that's why it works so well on belly fat.
Yeah, it's actually, well, there's 2 reasons. One is it's accessing your fat stores, so now it can really burn into that. The second reason is a bit of the science. Fat is the only food group that does not cause the body to release insulin. So we've got fat, we've got protein, we've got carbohydrates. Carbohydrates breaks down into sugars. That goes into the bloodstream. You get an immediate insulin rise to get the sugars out. Insulin, always around the middle is related to your body releasing too much insulin. Doesn't matter what the reason is, but your body's releasing too much insulin for whatever reason. So carbohydrates break down into sugars. You get an insulin rise to take the sugars out. Now they're going to, okay, long story short, but the fast version is these are going to end up as belly fat, basically, these sugars. Yeah. They'll get converted. Protein breaks down into amino acids as lovely building blocks, that all that structural tissue, and sugars. So you get a little protein rise with your piece of chicken, for example. A little insulin rise, excuse me, with your piece of chicken. Not a big one, but a little one. Fat, nothing. Nothing. There's no insulin rise at all.
Right, okay.
So fat flatlines insulin, as in a high-fat diet, can help flatline the insulin, if you like. And now you can start getting rid of all that belly fat.
Yeah. Okay. And so does it work for everybody?
My first answer to that was going to be yes. And then there is a no, it doesn't. I'm going to be honest with you. There's two occasions I find it doesn't work. It's now assuming you're doing it correctly. You're doing it correctly. It works for everybody except 2 instances that I know of. The first is thyroid issues. Now, it will work so it does actually work, but it's slower. So if you're on thyroid medication or you do have known thyroid issues, it tends to be slower. It doesn't tend to be as effective. You could get someone else that might lose their 8 pounds in 3 or 4 weeks effortlessly and inches off, whereas with the thyroid issue, you might find it's only 3 or 4, if you know what I mean. So it's slower. And the other time is, and this bit is the amusing bit, is it doesn't work if your hormonal level is nicely perfect. So in my view, if your insulin is lovely and steady, if you don't have much belly fat, if you eat really well and everything's really steady, then it's working primarily by stabilizing that insulin. So if the insulin is already lovely and steady, it won't make much difference. That's basically, to put it another way, is if you're in pretty good shape and you really don't have much belly fat to lose, then you may not find you lose weight on this.
Okay.
There's other approaches. So if I got somebody, this answers your first question. Sorry, I had one extra person to add into this. If I got somebody that had a really flat stomach but was trying to lose around their hips or bust or thighs, if they had a lot of fat that they wanted to lose that, from a health point of view, to be clear, you don't necessarily need to, but they wanted to, the high fat mightn't be the best approach.
Okay. So what would a day on the high fat diet actually look like?
What does it look like? Right. Simply put, every meal you've got to get this extra fat in. It's a high fat diet. If you reduce the fat, you slow down the result. This works, and back to your question earlier where you're saying, why does this work? Your body flips in burning fat as a fuel. So you've got to keep the fuel in there. If you take it out, it's going to start looking for sugars. It's going to find a different way. So on one of the high-fat diet that we do, we'd probably be looking at avocado, we'd be looking at nuts like walnuts or pine nuts. We might be looking at full-fat cream cheese, but equal olive oil or butter. They'd all work as your fat sources. So you want to get a certain amount of fat in with each meal. We look at around about 85 grams of cream cheese or walnuts, or full avocado, but you might replace that with maybe 30 grams of butter, if you like. And I'm not saying you want to do that, but you could. Eggs and avocado would work perfectly as a breakfast. or smoked salmon and cream cheese. A lunch can be salad, like a green salad will work well in this. And your fat can be just walnuts and avocado on the salad itself. You can have an olive oil and vinegar dressing. All green vegetables are fine in splam. So everything green is fine. You just don't want the coloured vegetables in, the ones that are higher in sugars, like the tomatoes. You don't want fruit in because, again, it's higher in the sugars.
Right.
All
Okay.
fruits. An evening meal could be a couple of salmon fillets. You could have, some people melt boursin and use it as a sauce on a steak to get the fat in.
Wow.
You could have your green vegetables there with butter or olive oil on top. Or you could have a salad on the side with some avocado and walnuts. Any fish or meat. Halloumi works great. Any kind of cheese, halloumi, emmental, any of those feta cheese. A lunch could be a feta cheese salad. It could be a prawn salad, if you like. So some of the meals can look quite normal. You know, you could have a prawn salad with some avocado and there you're done. It's quite easy. Others you can make quite quirky by putting your cream cheese on top of, and there you go.
And is it so would your meal still be like a normal size meal? You're not reducing anything, or
the portion sizes on this are strict.
Right.
It's a fussy diet. They are strict.
Okay.
So we're looking at about this 85 grams of fat with each meal, which is a lot more than what most people think. It's a full avocado.
Okay. And would
Now,
you, sorry to interrupt, would you be having 3 meals a day?
a very good question.
Okay.
Hold that question. Don't let me forget to answer that one, because that's a really good question on this one. For the sake of what I'm about to say next, let's assume it's 3 meals a day. You'd have that full avocado with each meal if you're going avocado, or you might have full avocado with one and then maybe the 85 grams of nuts with another. Now that's a lot more nuts than most people think. It's almost like a pack. You get these 100-gram packs. It's almost like a pack. So it's a lot of the fat in there. The protein, your fish, your meat, your cheese, your eggs, it starts small at breakfast. It's a little bit bigger for the second meal, and then it can go bigger for the third. So you're looking at around about 60 grams of, say, smoked salmon or cheese. This is equivalent to 2 eggs for your first meal. You can go up to 120 grams for your second, which is like a chicken breast or salmon fillet, give or take. And then the third meal, you can double that up and you can go up to 240 grams. Now that's like 2 salmon fillets. It's like a good medium steak. So it's not tiny.
No.
It's not tiny.
No.
Vegetables you don't want loads of, but a fistful portion of greens, for example, with the evening meal. So it's kind of like a standard portion will work well, but you don't want loads because vegetables are still carbohydrate.
Right.
Now they won't blow the plan, the green vegetables, but you don't want loads. A medium salad will work well. So that's roughly the portion sizes with each. Now, this leads to your lovely question, which I really like, which is how many meals a day? This is what I love about this plan. And I know very few other plans that work as precisely as this. A very underweight person on this plan will be starving on 3 meals a day. They'll be eating well over the 2,000 calories, but they'll be starving on 3 meals a day. They'll probably want a fourth. They could even want a fifth. A very overweight person on this plan, an obese person on this plan, will probably get through their first few meals and then their appetite would go completely. They would feel like they've eaten, they'd feel full all the time, but they just wouldn't feel hungry at all. Your body flips into burning fat as a fuel, and if you've got lots of fat on your frame, chances are you'll be fine. Most people going on the plan, if you have, say, 7 pounds to lose, or 10 pounds, or 12 pounds, will often find 2 meals a day enough.
Okay. So you don't intermittent fast like at the same time unless
if you
don't need to eat.
If you're on 2 meals a day, you'll probably find you're organically doing that. Because you probably eat around 11 and then eat maybe at 5 or 6 kind of thing. So you'll have that naturally. So if you can get the intermittent fast in with it, that works superbly well. But the big rule, less than worrying about too much with your intermittent fasting, the big rule on this plan is don't eat if you're not hungry. And unlike any other plan I know, it's really obvious when you're not hungry. It's not just, am I feeling full, but I'm peckish. The peckishness kind of goes.
Okay.
And you either feel hungry or you don't. And you'll know. If you try and eat when you're not hungry, you'll get queasy. You just won't enjoy it. Equally, if you let yourself get too hungry, your energy will drop. And what I love about this plan is it really teaches you the relationship between energy and eating, which I think we tend to lose when we sort of eat here and there and everywhere. We forget that there is a direct relationship. So to put it in English, when you're burning fat on this plan, your energy will be high. So if your energy is high, it's a very good very good indication that you're going to be dropping fat and getting into
Yeah.
shape. If your energy is low in this plan, it means you're probably not burning the fat, and there's a very good chance you may not be eating enough fat or eating enough full stop.
Right.
So you
Okay.
might need to get that extra meal in.
So you
So it's
can kind of assess it according to how you feel, which is
100%.
really good, isn't it? Yeah. And
100%.
how long would you be doing it for?
Again, another great question. I ask my clients to do it for a minimum of 8 days.
Okay.
It's long enough to see a really lovely result. It's long enough to help stabilize the insulin, which will have benefits for tracking forward, to be clear. It's long enough to train the body back into that capacity to burn fat, which will make a difference. It stands in your stead, that, again, tracking forward. And it's long enough to keep the weight off that you lose. Right. I find if you only do 4 or 5 days, you can see a lovely loss in terms of weight and fat, but it seems to rebound more quickly, quite frankly.
Right.
So I find 8 days is kind of the minimum length to get all the benefits without suddenly losing them when you stop. However, if you're flying along in it, if you're feeling great, it can be great for mood, by the way, this one. It's surprisingly good because you're getting all these essential fats in and they can have a big impact on the brain and so on and so forth. So it really can be very helpful in that regard. If you're feeling great on it and you're losing fat and you're losing at a lovely pace, you can stay on for as long as you like. I'd one client years ago who lost nearly 100 pounds over 8 months sticking to it. And she was just going down, 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 down. And the reason she stayed on it that long was because she felt better doing it, way better on it than off it. She found it really easy. She wasn't hungry. She wasn't thinking of food. Yeah. Now, I'm not necessarily saying you need to do that. You can do it for 8 days and just stop and then go on to more, in inverted commas, what you might consider sensible eating, if you like. Okay. But I find 8 days is kind of the minimum for benefits that sustain, that hold.
Okay. So after the 8 days, would you go back to like your normal eating? Obviously, healthy and being conscious. Would you incorporate still parts of the diet into your day to day?
Lovely benefit of a high fat, and this is one of the reasons to actually go on it, because I mentioned at the beginning it helps kill all cravings and likes. It integrates some fabulous habits because it's stabilizing the insulin. The ghrelin, which is the hormone that gets released after insulin is released, it's the hormone that causes cravings and causing you to want more sugars and so on and so forth. So because you flatline the insulin, you flatline the ghrelin. So your cravings have now stopped. Right. You will more than likely have automatically gone into intermittent fasting because you're feeling fuller. The 2 meals is plenty. So everything's lovely and steady. You've got these lovely habits in place, which make it super easy when you come off it just to keep going. Yeah. And by that I mean you can reduce the fat down, you can reintroduce sensible, like more complex carbs into the meals you're having, and you'll have no issue whatsoever. You won't suddenly gain weight, you won't suddenly rebound. Honestly, you've lost the fat primarily by training your body to fat burning and stabilizing insulin. You haven't lost it by cutting back on calories. Yeah. So you're not suddenly, if anything, some people are decreasing calories when they come off because they take the fat out. Yeah. Yeah. So you will normally continue to lose. Just keep the habits in. There's no snacking. You find in a high fat, you don't want to snack. So you've just stopped all of those habits over those 8 days, and it's super easy to maintain them. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So where do people go wrong, perhaps, with it? Right. Well, first is they cheat. This plan does not work if you cheat. This plan is it's a bit like an on-off switch. If you do it 100%, you get stunning results. If you do it 90%, you don't necessarily get 90% of the result. You might only get 60% of the result. If you cheat, so your body's burning fat as a fuel. If you just have a little sugar treat, your body can actually it's a fast, cheap fuel. Your body can just flip and go back into burning the sugar. Now you're eating all this fat. Yeah. And quite frankly, you'll certainly slow the result. You could, if it was a big cheat, stall the result. Okay. So you really want to keep it. It takes up to 3 days for the body to properly flip into what they call the ketosis, where your body's burning that fat as a fuel. If you cheat, you could, now it doesn't always happen to this degree, but you could take yourself out of it, and it could take another 3 days to get back into it. Yeah. So for best results, just do it for 8 days perfectly. Yeah. Don't worry about 8 months. Yeah. Just do it 8 days perfectly. Yeah. So the biggest thing is they cheat, and often they may cheat without realizing it. Okay. So milk and coffee or tea, the milk has sugars in it, won't work. This happens less now. It used to happen a lot. Chewing gum, the little bit of sweeteners can impact it.
Yeah.
So there can be small sheets getting in here.
Yeah.
There are things where you might think, oh, that can't really make a difference, can it?
No.
A tiny bit of sugar, sweeteners, and teas and coffees could affect it. So
Okay.
don't cheat. It's not worth it for the results. Now, the really annoying thing that can happen, now this is really annoying because you've done all the hard work, and in many respects, this wasn't your fault. Sugar that they're putting into, say, things like smoked salmon or bacon. You might think there's sugar in it. They keep putting sugar into things that once upon a time there never was. So anything in a packet, check the ingredient list for sugars, because that will slow it down quite a bit on you.
Yeah.
Make sure there's no added sugar in anything.
Okay.
So that's the biggest mistake. And the next biggest is exactly as you said earlier, because it's so counterintuitive. People think, well, if I cut back on the fat, that must accelerate the results because I'm eating all this fat. So if they eat less, surely I'd get a faster result. You do
have
not.
to eat the fats to do
You
it.
do not. It's like trying to imagine you've got a log fire and it's all flaring up nicely and you're burning these logs. If you imagine the logs as fat, you're burning them away. If you took the logs out, you'll have no fire and nothing will burn. So you need, if you overeat the fat, and I'm not recommending you do this because you might feel queasy, but if you eat too much fat, you tend to accelerate the result.
Right.
Get a faster result, you lose more. So don't cut back on the fat options. Keep them, at the very least, keep the whole ratio of a meal the same.
Yeah.
But if anything, err on the side of more fat, not less.
Okay. So essentially, you do it. I mean, where it sort of it sounds more appealing to me is that you do it for 8 days.
Yes.
That's not something you're having to do for months and months to kind of see the results. So about day 3, you say you start burning the fat as opposed to sugars.
Yes.
So after the 8 days, and this might be a silly question, will your body just flip back if you have more sugars?
Now, it's a great question. So most people, when they're beginning this plan, so quite frankly, everybody before they start the plan is going to be burning sugars for fuel. If you wait around the middle, your body's releasing too much insulin. That could be because you're eating too many carbohydrates and sugars. It could be menopausal related because that affects it. It could be stress related because that affects the insulin. But whatever the reason behind the insulin, you're releasing a bit too much, you've got weight around the middle. So you're doing the high fat, first and foremost, to flatline the insulin, to get it going from ping-ponging, which is causing the weight to go into the middle, to flatlining. Now, when you come off it, it's not going to suddenly ping-pong again, unless you decide you're just going to have a feast of sugars non-stop. If you just eat sensibly, you're going to find what pre the high fat. Now, this is a very loose, crude demonstration, just to be clear. It's not scientific, but loose and crude. Pre the high fat, you might have had a meal with some carbs in it and your insulin went way up here. After high fat, you'll probably find it just lifts a little bit because you're not as reactive to it.
Yeah. Okay. Just going to interrupt here. It's the high fat diet that we are talking about. Someone's just messaged that they've just joined. And I can share about getting a copy and things like that and all the other information.
Perfect.
So it won't go.
Your insulin is now steady. So we're answering why would the weight just go back on when you finish. You've now stabilized your insulin, so you're in a better place. And the second is what I mentioned earlier, which is chances are you're going to go from a higher calorie diet, i.e. the high fat is not a low calorie plan, onto a lower calorie one just naturally when you take the fats out. Most people go on diets, they go low fat or low calorie, more to the point. And then they've got to eat normally again. So suddenly they're going from eating less to eating more. They haven't stabilized insulin or anything. They were cutting back, now they're eating more. So that's why you can get these rebounds. So you're going to probably be eating similar calories or possibly less. So you're going to keep losing. And because, and this is just the final reason, because you've got this lovely stabilizing of insulin, you won't be craving the sugary foods in the same way. You won't be snacking in the same way. So chances are, without even realizing it, you're going to be eating very differently after this than before you started without trying.
Okay.
You'll find you're sticking to meals. It's easier to stay with them. You're not snacking. You're not craving.
And so would you recommend that you sort of do it sporadically throughout a year just to ensure that you're keeping yourself
steady with it? It's a good question that when I had the gyms, a lot of clients used to do it. They'd have their kind of times of the year they do it. They might do it, we kind of might do it every January and every September kind of thing, where they kind of do a reset. if they found weight was creeping up, because sometimes what people find is when, for want of a better way of describing it, if they've gone off the wagon for a while,
Yes.
it's hard to rein it back in. You know, you keep going, no, I'm going to be good tomorrow, but then something comes up or crops up, and you just kind of get pulled in.
Yeah.
So they find it as a good way to almost mentally get themselves reined back in. Once you stabilize it, so much of the bad habits we have is hormonal driven. They're hormonal driven more than just I'm weak-willed. So in other words, when you get into that cycle, if the sugar's spiking, the insulin's going up and down, the ghrelin's going up and down, you're going to just crave. You need a lot of willpower to bypass it. And the lovely thing about the high fat is it stabilizes the insulin, so you don't need the willpower to bypass it. It becomes quite easy, almost organic. It becomes more natural to do. So it's a great way to just reset, if you like, get the body back into balance.
Okay. All right. So some other questions, we have some sort of general questions that often come up when it is mentioned on Instagram. So first one, does it affect your cholesterol?
Brilliant question, and that comes up time and again, understandably so. So yes and no. When it's done perfectly, it does, but to the positive.
Right.
It reduces it, and it certainly makes a difference in the research to the ratio of that HDL to LDL. So what you're looking for is a nice big gap from the good cholesterol and the bad cholesterol. So the good cholesterol increasing isn't necessarily a problem if the bad cholesterol, particularly the bad cholesterol, is decreasing. So it's been found to widen that gap. So it's a positive.
Right.
If you cheat, you could raise the negative cholesterol. So please don't cheat.
Okay. That's one reason not to cheat. Is it good for you to do the high
It's
fat?
good for you. Gosh, that's a really good question. Well, if you think about it this way, on average, people tend to lose. Like I had a client of mine that I'm training at the moment that's done it for the last 2 weeks, and she's lost almost 4 kilos on it in that time, all around the tummy and the belly. So that's over 8 pounds, about nearly 9 pounds actually. Now, if you think about that logically, all that fat off the belly and any fat around the belly and middle is indicative of fat around organs.
Yeah.
How can that be bad for you to get rid of that?
Yeah.
So your body's learning how to metabolize its fat. It's getting rid of the bad fat from the bad areas. In other words, that it's more that insulin related fat that it's getting rid of. It's not just stripping the body of fat from everything, if that makes sense. So in that regard, yes, it's very good for the brain. It's very good. The brain functions with a fat. A third of our brain is actually fat. So we need it to function. Fat is essential for creating more hormones. And it's naturally high in basically your fat soluble vitamins, your D, your E, your K, your A, those kind of ones. So there's a lot of benefits to it. A lot of benefits, I think, to it.
Okay. Is it dangerous at all?
Not, I mean, is it dangerous? I'm going to say no. I need to be careful making blanket sweeping statements, but no. I mean, the worst that would happen is if you eat a lot of carbs with a lot of fat, now you're just into unhealthy eating.
Yeah.
That's what they used to warn you against. You're not piling fat in on top of a load of sugar and a load of carbohydrates, because that's just not good for you. We all know that. So as long as you stick to it properly, no. And the research shows it has benefits for the cholesterol. There's lots of new research coming up. Now, just to be clear, I'm not stating this is the case. I'm just saying the research is supporting this. So please do your own research or talk to doctors if you're looking at anything medical. But there's now direction where it's looking as an anti-cancer diet. It seems to have some impact on that. I suspect it's just because you're bringing the inflammatory sugars down so much. It's great for type 2 diabetes because, again, it stabilizes the insulin. Indirectly, when you're getting rid of all that fat around the middle, that's going to have a knock-on benefit to the heart and so on. So there's a lot of other benefits to this plan. It's stunningly good for energy, good steady energy. It's stunningly good for mood. And I've had people, and again, please, I'm not recommending anyone play around with medications with a high fat. You've got to do that talking to doctors and anything else. But I have had clients where they've been on antidepressants and they found the high fat diet made a big enough difference in terms of their mood and brain functioning, and it impacted what they need in that regard. And there's a lot of research that's looking at autism with high fat and the functions of the brain and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of benefits.
Yeah, definitely. I've got another question, but I had one more thing I wanted to ask was when you start the diet, do you know, sometimes if you go on a diet or if you go on a where you're reducing certain things, you feel a bit crappy for the first few days. Am I allowed
Yes.
to say that word, by the way? Sorry. But do you go through a period of
That's a
transforming?
good question. So that's a really good question. Um, the answer to that is to a degree, yes.
Okay.
Be prepared to. It's interestingly because we don't realize how much, as a culture, as a society, over the last 2 to 3 decades, our eating patterns have changed. So
Mm,
when I started in the gyms, and this is in the early 2000s, oh my gosh, nobody was eating fat at all.
yeah.
Everyone's coming off these low fat diets. Eating an avocado or having many nuts was kind of a bit of a no go.
Yeah.
So if you come from a very low fat diet onto a high fat one, chances are you'll have more difficulty initially because your
Okay.
body's really not used to metabolizing. Let's get the word out. Breaking down those
Yeah.
fats
Okay.
and converting it into fuel. But nowadays, everybody tends to eat more fat generally. We put olive oil onto things, we have avocado things, we put nuts and seeds on things. So the, in inverted commas, side effects are much, much, much less. It's
Right.
far fewer and far more in between. What tends to happen, somewhere between day 2 and day 4, usually day 3, but for some people it might be day 2, for others it might be day 4, you can get a little bit of a low in energy
Okay.
because you're not getting in any sugars and your body was using those sugars for energy and it hasn't quite yet flipped into fat burning. So the gear hasn't quite changed. It's like you're between gears.
Okay.
So there's almost a little
Yeah.
lag that can go on for the best, for some people, a part of a day or the best part of a day. So your energy can be slightly lower. Some people find they get mild headaches, but to be honest, that tends to more happen when they reduce their tea and coffee because they're no longer allowed milk.
Yeah.
And that tends to be caffeine withdrawal. It's got
Yeah.
nothing to do with the diet. So
Yeah.
I'm always asking clients, please don't cut back on caffeine. It's bad enough giving up
No.
one drug of sugar. Try not to give up two at the same time.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so you might get a little bit of that.
Hmm.
If it's really bad, the little hack is just take a tiny shot glass of like orange and lemon juice on that day. So you get just enough of a sugar hit to lift you without pulling you completely out of the process
Okay.
of switching into it.
Okay. Good. Interesting. The question next is vegetarians and
Yeah.
vegans. So, how easy is it for them to
It's
do the high fat diet?
I'm afraid this version is simply it's not. Vegetarian, not too bad.
Yeah.
For 8 days, most can kind of get through it. So in other words, a lot of vegetarians doing this, a lot of people on this would find they're only eating 2 meals a day anyway.
Yeah.
And vegetarians, you can have your omelets, you can have your cheese, so you can work with it.
Mm.
Vegans, it's very hard. Now, there are versions of high fat diets out there that claim they get you into ketosis, and I think to a certain degree they would help. They're not as effective, and that's not saying you shouldn't do them, but they're not as effective for the simple reason that vegan foods are naturally higher, as in vegan protein foods are naturally higher in carbohydrate. The pulses and the beans, the lentils, they're not as high in the protein and they're slightly higher in carbohydrate than, for example, cheese or fish or meat.
Mm.
So it's
Yeah.
harder. It is harder.
Okay. Can I ask a question? Because when I looked at the book, I think I found it a bit overwhelming because obviously there's quite a few sort of recipes that you've put in and different meal options. Do you have to almost have something different across the 8 days, or could you stick to a few things that you like on
You can
repeat?
stick to
Does
the
it?
same thing
Okay.
every day. You
Okay.
can even have the same thing every meal if you wanted to.
Okay, so it isn't like you have to have a certain amount of choice
No,
within your diet in order, so
not
long
at
as
all.
you're just reaching the goal amount of fat and that within the meal, then that works. Because
100%.
I think I was overwhelmed by some of the all the different. I was like, we don't have all those things, so it would need to be. So yeah, if you could be a bit more. I'm quite a repetitive person with a lot of my food. I find I don't know whether other people are the same, but I tend to eat the same sort of thing for a lunch, the same sort of thing for dinners. So yeah, I wasn't sure how much you had to mix up the foods.
You don't at all. And to be honest, the more repetitive a person is, the easier they often find it to stay on these plans.
Yeah, yeah,
Because you can get nicely boring and just do the same thing every day and don't think
yeah,
about it. You can mix
yeah,
as much as you like, but no, you don't have to.
yeah.
You really don't.
Okay. And we have had a couple of questions, and someone has said, do you have to calorie count on this diet?
No, I wouldn't. I really wouldn't. I would go more organically with it. Stick to the portion sizes of the food.
Mm-hmm.
And then that rule, normally, depending on what weight or fat you have to lose,
Mm-hmm.
around about the third day, and I didn't emphasize this earlier, this is important, give yourself to about the third day into the fourth day when the body's now, it's switching into ketosis. Around about then, that's when you're going to find your appetite drops.
Okay.
And if you eat when you're not hungry, you'll just feel queasy and you probably won't lose any fat because your body's trying to burn your own body fat and you keep feeding it.
Yeah.
But you won't feel that well anyway.
Okay.
So if you're not hungry, don't eat. If you are hungry, do. It's
Okay.
not a starvation plan.
Okay. Someone else asked earlier on, I think it was about taking the supplement. So if you're on the high fat diet, can you still take, the magnesium rocks, creatine, amino slim, all of those?
Perfect.
Yeah.
Definitely. 100%.
And would you use the protein shake, the
Yes,
Casey?
I was just
Yeah.
going to say, if you're using the protein shake, ignore all the instructions at the back of the pack. You're now mixing it with cream or coconut cream.
Wow.
So it's now you'd use and go by. So with it, at breakfast, you'd only use about a third of a scoop, about 2 teaspoons. There's only a little bit of protein in the breakfast. With the lunch, you could double that, so you go half a scoop.
Yeah.
And if you had it as the evening meal, you could go for a whole scoop. And you're mixing it with a container of the coconut cream. Single cream is okay. Double cream's even better. If you mix it with double cream, mix with a small amount of water first.
Yeah.
Most of my clients use it as a dessert after the evening meal.
Yeah.
And what they do is they reduce the size of the evening meal. So rather than maybe 240 grams, like a big steak, they might have half that. And then they have the half portion size of the protein afterwards with cream, and they feel like they're having a dessert. And yes, you do get away with the chocolate protein on this. It does seem to work with the cream. Absolutely.
Lovely. Okay, great to know. I'm noticing a reduction in belly fat. Taking Amino Slim, how long should you roughly take this for, please? That's an
Well,
Amino Slim.
again, I'm actually going to say almost as long as you like. As long as you're getting results, absolutely, you can keep going with it.
Yeah.
It works best as a cycle. So if you are using it and getting the nice results with it, I would keep going until you hit your kind of target.
Yeah.
There's other benefits to Amino Slim. It's just an amino acid. You get it in your protein foods anyway. It helps the body convert ammonia into urea, so you're getting rid of it. Kind of like acts as a bit of a detox. So there's a few other benefits to Amino Slim. So you can take it for the reasons it's good for the liver. There's detox impacts of it.
Yeah.
Most take it for around about 3 months, but some will take it for 6 months or longer.
Okay. And I did have a question on DM, which was, I'm on day 10 blitz of the high fat diet, but find myself overeating on walnuts and dairy, so my weight loss has stalled.
Now, I hear that, and that tells me there's probably more eating going on outside of the meals.
Right.
But I could be wrong. I could be wrong. Keep to the portion sizes. 85 grams of walnuts. Now, there's a lot of walnuts in that.
Yeah.
Or 85 grams of cream cheese, and do not snack.
Okay.
So if you need to eat 3 meals a day, 3 meals a day, but don't snack. So that sounds to me, but I could well be wrong, that somebody is walking past the cupboard and seeing a few walnuts and picking up a few en route.
Okay.
Don't do that.
So don't snack in between the meals.
Yeah, don't snack.
Brilliant. Right. Well, we've answered all my questions. So I'm sure that some other questions will pop up from it, because as Yvonne had also messaged and said, it seems weird eating fat to lose fat. I agree, but it really does work. And I know that a number of influencers that we've worked with have also commented, particularly on their energy levels. And I think that's one of the things that's really, for me, that would make me want to give it a shot to really boost those energy levels. So yes, maybe I'll give it a shot and let you know how I get on.
Get on.
Um, so our talk today was part of a series that we're wanting to do on being strong, not just sort of strong for summer, but strong for the future as well. So next Tuesday, we're back on a Tuesday. We're going to be discussing being strong and how it supports us as we age. So again, I'll put out a little question box if anyone has any questions. But I will look forward to seeing you on Tuesday.
Brilliant.
Lovely. Thanks everyone for joining. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.